It all started on a quiet Friday afternoon at my ranch. The sun was just dipping low, casting long, golden shadows across the sprawling fields. I was out near the barn, checking the fences and making sure the livestock were secure, when my phone buzzed. It was a message from someone claiming to be an HOA representative. Before I could even read the whole thing, a chill ran down my spine. The words were threatening, vague enough to be sinister, precise enough to send a clear warning: we know what's happening on your property. You're going to regret ignoring us. At first, I thought it was just an empty threat, a typical overreach from the HOA trying to intimidate me. But something in the tone, the sheer audacity, made me uneasy. I glanced across the open fields, scanning the horizon. Nothing. Just the usual wildlife and the gentle sway of the tall grass. By sundown, the uneasy feeling had settled into my gut like a stone. Then I heard it, the unmistakable roar of engines. At first, I thought it was farm equipment, maybe a neighbor running late chores, but the sound grew louder, rougher, more menacing. I stepped out from the barn and squinted into the distance. 4 black SUVs barreled down the dirt path leading straight to my property. My pulse quickened. These weren't casual visitors, they were coming with purpose. I grabbed my radio and called my security team, but as usual, the response was delayed. That meant it was on me. I had prepared for threats before, but never like this. Never for people who would come onto my land, uninvited, with clear intent to intimidate. The vehicles skidded to a halt near the main gate. Out stepped 4 men, dressed in black, their faces hidden behind tinted sunglasses and baseball caps. The air around them seemed charged, aggressive. Their body language screamed trouble. I walked toward them slowly, hands visible, projecting calm, but ready for anything. "Evening," I said, my voice steady. "You're on private property. I suggest you turn around before things get ugly." One of them laughed, a low, mocking sound. "We're just here to talk," he said, taking a step closer. "You know how these HOA issues work. You've been a problem for us, and now it's time to settle things." I knew right then that words weren't going to solve this. They were here to intimidate, maybe even to hurt me, and they underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. I'd faced threats before, but I'd never back down when it came to protecting my land and everything on it. I backed up slowly toward my barn, my eyes scanning for anything I could use if it came to a confrontation. Old farming tools, fences, anything. My mind raced as I planned every possible move. These men were about to learn the hard way that my ranch wasn't just land, it was my fortress, my legacy, and I wasn't going to let anyone violate it. They advanced, and that's when I made the decision. I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. I would teach them a lesson they wouldn't forget, one that would make sure the HOA thought twice before sending anyone else onto my property. The moment they stepped onto my property, I could feel the tension in the air. The dust from their SUVs still swirled around their boots, and the setting sun cast long, menacing shadows across their faces. They thought they had the advantage: numbers, intimidation, and the element of surprise, but I had something they didn't: knowledge of every inch of this land and a determination forged over years of defending it. "Listen," I said, keeping my voice calm, controlled. "You don't know what you're walking into." One of the men smirked and moved forward, clearly expecting me to back down. He didn't realize that I had been preparing for this for weeks, ever since I'd received the first subtle threats from the HOA. I had reinforced the barn, set traps around the perimeter, and even scouted escape routes in case things went south. But I didn't plan on running. I planned on showing them that this ranch wasn't for taking. As the first thug reached for something in his jacket, I grabbed a length of heavy-duty rope and swung it in a wide arc. It struck the nearest man squarely across the chest, sending him stumbling backward. Shock registered on his face, he hadn't expected resistance. The other three hesitated, giving me a precious few seconds. I ran toward the nearest gate, flipping the latch open, and pulling out a flare gun I kept for emergencies. I fired a warning shot into the air, the bright flare slicing through the dimming sky. Birds scattered, and the sudden light made the men freeze. "This land is mine," I yelled. "Leave now, or you'll regret it." Two of the men exchanged a quick glance, clearly reconsidering their approach, but the leader stepped forward, sneering. "You're bluffing," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "We've been sent to handle you, one way or another." That was the moment I realized talking wasn't going to work. Action was required. I sprinted to the barn, grabbing my old but reliable ATV. It roared to life immediately under my hands. With a quick glance in the rearview mirror, I saw them scrambling toward their vehicles, unsure how to react. I slammed the throttle and shot forward, kicking up a cloud of dust and dirt. I drove in a tight circle around them, creating chaos, confusion, and just enough intimidation to throw them off balance. One of the men tripped over a loose wire I had left exposed, another precaution I had installed after seeing the first warning signs from the HOA. The wire wrapped around his leg, and he went down hard, cursing as I circled past. The leader tried to regain control, but I was faster, more agile, and intimately familiar with the terrain. I maneuvered the ATV between two of them, forcing them back toward the edge of the field. One of them attempted to draw a weapon, but the flare gun had already put them on edge. Every movement they made was hesitant, fearful, and clumsy. By the time I stopped, the thugs were sprawled across the ground, breathing heavily, some nursing bruises and scrapes. The look on their faces told me they were starting to realize just how badly they had underestimated me. I stood tall, hands on my hips, surveying the scene. The sun had nearly disappeared behind the hills, leaving the sky streaked with fiery oranges and reds, a perfect backdrop for the lesson I had just delivered. "Next time you think about sending people onto my land," I said slowly, deliberately, "make sure they are ready to face me. Because I don't back down. I protect what's mine." They scrambled back to their SUVs, nursing their pride and injuries, and I watched as they drove off into the fading light. Dust settled over the field, the echoes of engines fading, leaving nothing but silence, and the satisfaction of knowing that my ranch remained untouched, my boundaries respected. The silence after they left was almost deafening. I stood in the middle of my property, the dust settling around me like a curtain. My chest was still pounding from the adrenaline, but a sharp clarity settled in. This wasn't over. The HOA would regroup, and they would likely try something else, thinking they could intimidate me again. I walked slowly back to the barn, scanning the horizon as I went. Every inch of my land was familiar, every hill, every grove of trees, every narrow path. I knew this ranch like the back of my hand, and I was ready to defend it again if necessary. But preparation wasn't just about brute force, it was about strategy. Inside the barn, I pulled out a detailed map of the property. I began marking potential entry points, noting weak spots in the fencing, and planning new ways to secure them. Over the years, I had learned that the best defense was anticipation. That meant creating layers of protection, alarms, traps, and routes that would allow me to maneuver around intruders while keeping myself and the property safe. I also called a trusted local attorney, someone who had dealt with HOA disputes before. "Listen," I said, pacing as I spoke, "they sent thugs onto my property. I defended myself and my land, but I need to make sure the HOA is held accountable. I can't let this slide. It's harassment, plain and simple." The attorney agreed immediately. "We can file complaints, notify law enforcement, and even take civil action if necessary. But first, you need to document everything. Photographs, videos, witness statements, anything that proves they trespassed and intended harm. I spent the next few hours doing exactly that. I took photos of the tracks left by their SUVs, marked the spots where they stumbled over my traps, and even recorded the remnants of the chaos they left behind. Every detail mattered. Not just for legal reasons, but as a reminder to myself, this ranch would not be taken lightly. As night fell, I walked along the perimeter, flashlight in hand, checking every fence post, every gate, every shadowed corner. I reinforced weak spots, tightened locks, and even installed a few new deterrents. By the time I returned to the main house, I felt a sense of calm. The ranch was secure, and I had made it clear that I would fight for it, no matter what. But even in that calm, I knew the HOA would react. They were arrogant, entitled, and used to thinking they could manipulate situations to their advantage. They underestimated me, and that mistake had cost them. They would try again, and I needed to be ready, not just physically, but mentally. I sat on the porch, looking out over the fields, letting the cool night air wash over me. The stars sparkled above, indifferent witnesses to the drama below. I reflected on the day's events, the confrontation, the chaos, and the victory. And I made a silent promise. No one would ever threaten my land again, without facing consequences far worse than a few bruises and scratches. As I closed my eyes that night, I could already envision the next steps, documenting everything further, strengthening defenses, and ensuring that my property was untouchable. The HOA thought they could send thugs to intimidate me. They thought they could test my limits. But they had learned a painful lesson. This ranch was mine, and anyone who stepped onto it uninvited would regret it. The next morning, the ranch was quiet, almost serene. But beneath the calm, I knew the HOA was already planning their next move. That's why I wasted no time. I called the local sheriff's department, detailing exactly what had happened the night before. I had every piece of evidence ready, photos of tire tracks, damage to the property, and even video from security cameras I had strategically placed. The sheriff listened, took notes, and promised to send a patrol around my property more frequently. "You did the right thing by documenting everything," he said. "Trespassing and intimidation are serious offenses. If they try anything else, we'll be ready." Next, I drafted a formal letter to the HOA, making it clear in no uncertain terms that any further attempts to harass me or my property would result in immediate legal action. I included the evidence I had collected and copied my attorney on the correspondence. The letter was firm, professional, and absolutely uncompromising. By mid-afternoon, the HOA board had responded, but not in the way they had intended. Their tone was defensive, almost panicked. They had underestimated me, underestimated my resolve, and underestimated how seriously I took my rights as a property owner. Their letter begged for a meeting, a chance to clarify matters. I smiled, knowing full well that the tables had turned. I agreed to the meeting, but only under strict conditions. No one would come onto my property without permission, law enforcement would be present, and any attempts at intimidation would be met with immediate consequences. The HOA reluctantly accepted, clearly aware that their bluff had been called. The meeting itself was surreal. Board members shuffled nervously, avoiding eye contact as I calmly laid out everything: their thugs trespassing, the traps and defenses that foiled them, the police report, and the legal actions that were already underway. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in their eyes. The arrogance that had fueled their schemes was gone, replaced by a grudging respect, or perhaps self-preserving panic. By the time the meeting ended, it was clear that the HOA had learned their lesson. They couldn't bully me, they couldn't intimidate me, and they certainly couldn't claim any authority over my land. Every step I had taken, the preparation, the defense, the documentation, and the strategic response, had ensured that my property and my rights remained untouchable. In the days that followed, I strengthened the ranch even further. Cameras, reinforced gates, motion sensors, and warning signs made it impossible for anyone to approach without being seen. I even shared some of the footage and documentation with neighbors, making sure word spread that this property was protected, and that attempts to challenge it would not be tolerated. Standing on the porch one evening, looking over the fields as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. My ranch was safe, my boundaries respected, and my authority unquestioned. The HOA had sent thugs, hoping to intimidate me. They left crawling, both literally and figuratively, forced to confront the consequences of their arrogance. This ranch wasn't just land, it was a statement. A statement that some things aren't up for negotiation, that some rights are non-negotiable, and that anyone who dares to overstep will face the consequences. And as long as I stood guard, I knew that lesson would never be forgotten. The land was quiet again, the night settling in, but this time it was different. This time, it was mine, untouched, unchallenged, and completely under my control.